Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. This is the second part of the question time where I'm answering the questions that were posted at the below the interview I had with Richie Allen last night. And there are some great comments, and now I'm continuing with, hang on, I'm now, there's Super Crazy Waffles says, I'm tortured with directed energy weapons daily and gang stalked in effing Iran. Well, I'm really, really sorry to hear that. Stay tuned in, because people are being attacked with this stuff globally. And we'll try to, if you're in Iran, you might not be able to speak up about this. So we will shout the louder for you, okay? And then you have to somehow network with people, to get somebody to care about you, to then speak up for you, That's what you have to do. But I will work doubly hard, and we have to get it to Iran. Forgive me, Iran. I was reading the next comment, but I misspoke. I remember you are in Iran. So Andrew T says, while I'm sure intelligence services have microwave weapons, her website seems fake. For example, on her How Is It All Possible page, she has 3 quotes, and then under it, in brackets, it says, not all real quotes. Why would you use 3 quotes to prove something when you know some of them are not real? This is a major red flag that it is disinformation agent. Well, actually, you remind me of something. My website, hang on, let me bring it up. So, my website, you're absolutely right, and what you're actually looking at is a joke. Okay, that's basically it, and I'll read it out for people what the joke was about, and I'm going to turn it into a more serious point, because you're right, actually you triggered something that I think I have to point out. Now, what he refers to is, if you go to my website, the middle bit with the woman going like, it says, how is it all possible? And if you scroll down, after the first paragraph, there's a section called how can they be so deranged? And then the first sentence, which I have written, says, this is what others are said to have said about MI5/6. Now, already this thing that I'm quoting people, quoting other people, sorry, it was like in a weak moment when I was so sick of the psychopathology. I wanted to put some bit of humanity and humor back into it, and my humor might have run away with me, but this is the only thing, usually you should be able to work out what's a joke and what isn't. And most of the page, there's no lies on this and no disinformation, not intentionally. If I get something wrong, it's because I genuinely, got it wrong. But this is the one joke I have on the website, okay? And then I also have lots of jokes that I don't really mean literally on the things, which is like, to all the single ladies. But, people can typically detect what is joke and what's not. So he refers to 3 quotes I put up, and the quotes are basically, so I wrote, this is what others are said to have said about MI5/6, and then I put 3 quotes in the style that where you have book reviews, people write something and then their name below that. And the 3 quotes were, the sickest bunch of fuckers I've met in my life, Idi Amin, a gay mafia, utterly insane, Robert Mugabe, I absolutely hated working for them, seriously, these people need help, Harold Shipman. And in very small brackets, like small print, I wrote, not all real quotes. And the emphasis is on all, because one of them, I think, is a real quote. And I wasn't standing next to the man, because thank goodness I've never met these 3 men. But one of the things I've quoted, I have heard from several sources that are, I think, so far out in information space from each other that they seem independent to me. And when I see that, I think the statistical likelihood of some people saying something quite so specific, who seem to be unrelated totally, means that it's very likely true. And it's now your quiz to guess which of the 3 quotes is actually a real quote, as far as I can tell. And the other 2 I've made up. And I'll leave you with that to work that out. But one of them, I think, is genuinely a real quote. So there we are. So much about disinformation agent. I'm sorry. I didn't want to be disinformation. I just made a joke, okay? And sorry, I mean, if you read these 3 quotes, would you just think, oh, just because she's written that? I mean, already, anyway, I will not give away which quote is real and which isn't. You work it out. So, then there is, hang on. There's quite, okay, here, Giles Thompson. I'm gonna spend some time answering that. He says, okay, so I got a call. Bullshit. Clearly, this woman's research budgets have all but dried up, and she's seeking a new way to bring in additional revenue. Now about that, Giles, you're right, my research budgets have dried up, but that was in 2012 when I left St. John's College, Oxford, because my fellowship, came to an end and I wanted to do something else. So if you watch the video, Who I Am, you can see what I did since then. But you're right, my research budgets, I didn't have a research budget since 2014. That's right. Additional revenue, well, I gave this interview for free, I didn't get paid for this. Richie Allen didn't pay me. And my YouTube videos, I don't even have like monetization switched on. Do you see? I'm not making even any money out of your views. Maybe I should, because I want to actually fund the court case. So maybe I'll get onto that, and I'll do. And once I do, can you please all click and just have it running on silent in your homes, and then I get money for that. Or maybe that's it. That's how to crowdfund. That's how to crowdfund court cases for whistleblowers. Hey, he just gave me a brilliant idea. But anyway, additional revenue. I'm not getting any revenue for this, Giles. You see. What a preposterous story. Men are waiting outside your house, following you to work, etc. And you don't notify the police? No, Giles, I have. I have notified the police. In Switzerland, they couldn't give a damn. I notified the police in Germany. They couldn't give a damn. And in one of my videos where I talk about the Bundeskriminalamt, the BKA, if you find that video, I tell you what happened when I contacted them. But I contacted police stations over and over. And I shall upload either tonight or tomorrow the video of what happened when I contacted British police just at the end of October, when I went to watch the Employment Tribunal case of Dr. Stephen Frost versus MOD, and I was assaulted, shot in the head, driving my car from London Airport to Manchester. And then when I was in the hotel overnight, they had irradiated half my skull so hard, half my head felt damaged the next day, including my face. So, but I didn't want to miss the court hearing, so I went there, I attended the entire court hearing, and at the end of it, I went to the police, and I wanted to report the crime. And I also wanted to report the crime because the first thing the judge said to me when he heard that, my pleading, he said, have you gone to the police? And I said, well, I have locally where I live. I went to the local police several times, but they don't do anything. And that's what all victims claim. And I also think it doesn't even appear in the crime records. And I've got evidence for that based on what the German police did and what the UK police did. They acted in a way that it makes me think that they actively did not want to have a crime file where this appears. Do you see? So much about the police, but I shall upload this. And the UK police basically put on intimidation theatre, like proper full-blown intimidation theatre, wasting 4 man-hours of emergency response services. And you can see all about that, tonight or tomorrow. But so much about the police. She then goes on to say a helicopter flew above her, and she knew at once that some high-energy weaponized wave device was being used against her. What the fuck? Now, what the fuck is exactly what I thought at the time when this was happening. And your WTF is just in capital letters. Mine was boldface in my head, And how did I know it was an energy weaponized wave device? Curious name, weaponized wave device. It was certainly high energy. It was a wave device, electromagnetic wave. And I knew because I was standing under a glass roof at the time. And the helicopter was close for a helicopter, but not close enough that you would expect to feel the pressure waves. So if you say 75 to 100 meters for a helicopter, which is I think what it was roughly, then that's close for a helicopter, but you wouldn't feel pressure waves, when you're standing. And you can tell that when a helicopter's landing, you don't actually feel the pressure wave, only when it gets fairly close. But then also, because of the glass roof, I knew it couldn't be the airwaves. And this was what happened, when was that? It was, I think, on the 1st of July 2015. That was the exact day when it happened, in Munich, on our rooftop terrace in Munich. And but then 6 weeks later, this was the middle of September, I was lying in bed, and they did the same thing with me, Giles, lying in bed. This time no helicopter involved. And I felt the same waves, You know, in case I hadn't understood that they are now targeting you with electromagnetic weapons. I felt the same thing. And that time when I was lying in bed, I was woken up by this essentially. And I'm pretty sure I was awake because I kept like hitting my husband and trying to wake him up, and he got pretty angry with me and he mentioned it the next day. So this wasn't like something I'd imagined or dreamt, you know. And what happened is that time the waves seemed to be coming from the the neighboring flat. And the waves were traveling that time, instead of like up through my, you know, my face, my head and my chest. That time I felt it on the front of my chest and the front of my legs with the helicopter. When I was lying in bed, I felt it essentially through my entire legs and up through my body, and the pressure seemed to be coming from my legs. So the waves were traveling towards me, lying down horizontally, you know, so up my legs, and the helicopter was down, from my head down. And when that happens to you, I know if you've never experienced this, then it sounds incredible. But what you can do, Giles, is if you can get yourself into the London Arms Fair, or any arms fair, wherever you are, and see what kit they are selling there. I think that would be an eye-opener. And if you know somebody in the military or in the police, maybe some special units, you can ask him, because I think these things are being built now into helicopters for crowd control. So the way to cross-check if I'm saying the truth is maybe talk to protesters who you trust. Have they ever come across something like that? Maybe internationally, maybe other countries are already using it in large numbers. But your best bet would be someone you know in the military who is involved in this sort of stuff, or with helicopters, and ask him. And if they've got one of those things, ask your friend to trigger that device 100 meters above your head and see what it feels like. And then I won't even get started on her friends and family jackets mysteriously being stolen. Laugh out loud. Why in the world would secret services engage in the practice of stealing jackets? Well, Giles, I can tell you it's not because they're short of jackets. It's not because they need them or because they want to steal. It's because this is harassment. It's because when stuff gets stolen from you, your privacy space gets invaded and you feel immediately put upon. It stresses you out on a primordial level. This is intimidation theater, you see? And it's not stealing. It's not about, I'm not claiming that, you know, the biggest problem we have is that our intelligence agencies are making money by selling stolen jackets. Although now that I say it, I have to wonder where my, you know, my family's jackets ended up. I should have maybe checked the local black market, you know. Gosh, but anyway, no, the point is that they, by taking stuff from you, and especially something like your jacket, you know, you have to walk home in the cold, right? Pretty you will notice, and then you have the hassle of then walking to the shops if you just have one coat without it, but it's something you will notice and you will get annoyed. You might have stuff in its pockets. It really inconveniences you, you see. But it was not just jackets, it was also bikes, you know, being stolen. And the key was that it was sometimes stolen within seconds. And then I can use, as a scientist, a probabilistic argument, and I can say, well, what's the probability for stealing one bike? Okay, it's a certain thing that, you know, the police knows. We have these statistics. But what's the probability of having 2 bikes stolen in a row? Well, that's smaller. When you've got 3 bikes stolen in a row, that's already very unlikely, especially if it's in a short time period. Do you see? So this is how you can tell that it's getting ever more unlikely, mathematically, without making any assumptions about intelligence agencies. But when then a bike gets stolen within literally seconds, you put the bike down because you just want to pop into a shop, not even to shop, but just to ask the person, or has my package arrived, because it's maybe a package shop, you know. And then you come back out 3 seconds later because the answer was no. And you come back out and your bike's gone, and you were in for 5 seconds in a really small kiosk, and your bike's gone. The only person who could have stolen that was someone who's been watching you all along and saw that you stopped with the bike without locking it up. You see? So when that happens and it's the 2nd or 3rd bike in a row being stolen, you can use a probabilistic argument, and if it was just random thefts, then the 2nd bike's already rare. But the 2nd bike, what is the probability of it being stolen in the first 10 seconds or the first minute of it being parked? That is really rare, you know, because most bikes get stolen when they're left overnight at train stations and stuff like that. So, you know, that's it. Catherine, if you are reading this, I am, put the book of equations down. I have long ago. Step away from your desk and get help now. Well, you see, that's why I talked to Richie Allen last night, because I am trying to get help. Ha 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 ha, let this be a warning to others. Too much time spent next to a particle accelerator can be hazardous to your health. Laugh out loud. Well, here it is, Giles. One of the things I can tell immediately is that you're not a particle physicist. Because actually, particle physicists do not spend any time next to their particle accelerators, you see, because you understand the physics. So when our particle accelerators are on, Giles, we are as far away from these particle accelerators as you can possibly be. We try to be as far away, you know, when you're at CERN, ideally as the other normal non-physicists in Geneva or people living around us. We try to be above ground, and these things are below ground, like literally, like, you know, 100 meters or more above ground. You know, I don't know, I actually forgot the number, I used to know it. I mean, the accelerator at in Germany I used to work at was 23 meters underground. So you had literally like an eight floor block, you know, underground, and you would take a lift on ground level down 8 floors, and that's where you worked. That's where the control room was. And even the control room now in Hamburg, that was close to the particle accelerator, but it was calculated that the shielding was thick enough. And also, what you have to do when you're next to a particle accelerator is never ever be on the outside, all right? Because of synchrotron radiation, it radiates outwards. If you're on the inside, you're safer, but not safe because particles get back reflected and stuff. So I'm sorry, Giles, I was never near a particle accelerator when it was on. No particle physicist ever is, because, you know, a normal person who doesn't know particle physics might, by accident. I mean, there's security everywhere, so we make sure no soul wanders close to these devices when they're on. Not even an animal by chance. You know, that's why it's underground. So particle accelerators are safe for that reason, because you've got the best physicists in the world in charge of health and safety, for their own health and safety, because after all, our offices are above ground, you know. So don't worry, we'll take care of that, because if something goes up, we're the closest, but nothing goes up, you know. But just for you, Giles, when you're visiting CERN, for example, you're down in the tunnel, you'll notice you're on the inside of that big blue pipe. You're always on the inside, because on the outside of the pipe, we don't put anything, not even our sandwiches. Do you see? Because when this thing is on, the radiation goes outwards, you know, out like a carousel, the radiation, synchrotron radiation, you know, when you're on a carousel, you fly outwards. Well, the radiation flies outwards too, you see, and that's why. So you will always be on the inside of a particle accelerator. The circular ones, they're also linear ones. Okay, so it's not that much bullshit, but then what do the 3 replies say? Hang on, let me just check. Oh, yes, God. No, Giles also said something good after that. He said, couldn't agree more. I can't see the actual comments because they're still loading. Here, he said, couldn't agree more. Her claims are sadly reminiscent of those espoused by the incredibly gifted mathematician and academic John Forbes Nash at the height of his mental illness. I've always wondered if perhaps those gifted with extraordinary analytical and pattern matching skills are in some way predisposed to paranoid delusions purely by virtue of their predilection to perpetually attempt to detect patterns in events and phenomena, irrespective of whether or not such patterns actually exist. Well, I think there is a chance that if you're always working in pattern recognition, but then again, if you're working with pattern matching skills, and you have the skills, for example, as a particle physicist, I had to have the skills, but it's not just, oh, we're publishing a paper about every pattern we detect, Giles. Our skill lies in the fact of detecting which pattern is real, Giles. That's what we publish our papers on. Do you see? So when you're talking to a particle physicist who's published papers and who had a career in particle physics, you're talking to one who managed to detect patterns that exist. And if you read my thesis, it's about a pattern that actually exists, and it was really hard to detect, but I measured it, you see, but measuring it was already my skill. So I think, Giles, you'll find that you should take these people very seriously. And as far as John Forbes Nash is concerned, by the way, I am honored if anybody puts me in the same sentence or the same even, you know, comment as John Nash. But I don't belong there, because he was like on a different plane, because he is like a special genius, even amongst geniuses. So, at the height of his mental illness, well, I don't actually know much about his mental illness. I know some about it, but for example, I know for a fact that he claimed to have been persecuted and stalked all throughout his life. And all I can say to that is, if you are the most gifted mathematician in the world, potentially, the CIA is going to keep an eye on you forever until the end of your life. Why? Because if someone else got you as an agent, you would be like the super weapon. Because gifted mathematicians, essentially, they can in a second spot something that other people cannot in a lifetime, not even with assistance. Do you see? So anybody, a gifted mathematician, if they get near your code, you know, if they are malicious, they can just, it doesn't matter how many armies, depending on what you do, because sometimes you just get, you know, drowned in data. But even then, geniuses have a way to get to the real stuff that matters in smaller number of steps. So you might have worked for, you know, decades to build up barriers so that people can't find the stuff that you want hidden, and then someone literally within 3 steps just gets there through the back door because they're genius. So geniuses are like, you know, the most dangerous thing to a crime cartel and to intelligence agencies, because they just spot stuff. They understand stuff by just looking at even just traces. You know, they can do deductive reasoning like a supercomputer. So John Nash, if you just think about it for a second, must have been under lifelong surveillance. And, you know, based on what I have seen, believe I've seen from the intelligence agencies, most of these stalkers are Muppets. Okay? So you've got John Nash, freaking genius of geniuses, and a bunch of gang stalkers. Well, statistically speaking, it's impossible that all these gang stalkers are as genius as John Nash, because then they would be John Nash. Get it? Do you see? So you've got one guy who's freaking brilliant, and you've got armies, hordes of people who you're actually paying for gang stalking. So you're not exactly going to get like a professor of biochemistry stalking John Nash in the street, right? Are you? So you're going to have stupid people stalking smart people. So most likely they're going to figure out that they're stalked, no? And could it be the case that when John Nash was trying to get out the fact that he was harassed and stalked, that the press was bought up and they wanted to keep him, you know, kind of in a pressure cooker? I think that's more what's going on. So, but thank you for mentioning John Nash, because I think we have to go back and look at everything John Nash said and reassess. But by the way, and this is now for everyone's information, one of the things I have heard John Nash say, and now again I'm quoting someone who's quoted someone, but I think this is actually true. John Nash also, as far as I'm aware, said that, you know, we are all locked in to this super cartel. You know, that's, I think, one of the things that people said he's paranoid about, like, oh, we're all controlled and it's all being controlled. And, you know, I think he said that we are all the corporations and all the companies are interlocked into the superstructure, you know. And I think, I mean, this guy must have also been given access to, like, you know, like research, because people would want to use his brain, you know, for like, you know, national security and other stuff. So he must have been given access. So he could have had access to databases. But now, this is now public and transparent, because what a group of mathematicians have done at ETH Zurich, and please everyone look this up, because it's the biggest bombshell publication ever. And you don't need maths to understand it, but it is, I think, the best thing the maths people have given us in a long time. And this was a group of mathematicians at ETH Zurich. It was Glattfelder and, oh man, I can't remember the other names. And I'm sorry, people always just remember the first authors. All the other people are now, you know, hating me. But please just look up the paper. Go to archive.com, A-R-X-I-V, sorry, not .com, arxiv.org, archive.org. Sorry, I'm just gonna, and then, if you do that, in the search bar, this is all scientific papers for free access, as it should be, because the science already got paid for, you know, through taxation. So it's free access. And go in and in the search bar, type Network of Global Corporate Control, okay? And then you will find, I'm referring to the 2011 paper, which the index number starts with 11 for the year 2011, and I can't remember the exact, you know, numbers. But that is essentially these mathematicians working through all the public company databases and just looking at the ownership structure. And there's a TED talk about this as well, possibly by Glattfelder, I'm not sure. But you know, if you Google for network of global corporate control, you will find the TED Talk, which might link this archive page. But the archive paper is the actual scientific paper, and you can download the PDF for free. It's there, and read the paper, because this is now proper scientific proof that what people used to call the cartel, the syndicate, the global conspiracy actually exists. And these mathematicians went through all the public company databases and looked at the ownership structure, and they discovered that through interlocking boards of directors, so directors were placed on several boards, people managed to get control, actual ownership, without having ownership through the shares, instead ownership through the board membership. And they control these companies through these interlocking boards, and you can map out the structure. And this is how these mathematicians could prove who owns, you know, something like, I don't know, like 40% of the wealth and 80% of the companies, or the other way around. I mean, I have to read the paper again. But this is basically like stupendous amounts of wealth in the world, owned by a very few select number of people, you know. And you can find a list of the top 20 companies that own the world there. Not a conspiracy, this is a mathematical, administrative fact, as it's being, you know, published in the public company accounts. But I think they analyzed 43,000 companies. So to analyze that, you have to use databases and you know, database analysis tools, you know, and you have to be sure that you're doing it right. So that's why it took so long for us to get behind this. But now it's official. So now we know what John Nash was saying is true. We have it, you know. Back then they called him paranoid. It's true. John Nash was right. So let's go back to what this brilliant genius was saying. Everything was saying. And if he had really mental health issues, also keep in mind that it might have been drug testing that the CIA ran on him to either take him down a notch if he was working on stuff that they didn't like, or maybe experiment on, you know, different brain enhancing drugs if they can turn him into a super genius, you know, because if other countries also have their geniuses, it's like genius against genius in these like warmongering, you know, psychos' heads. So also keep in mind that the intelligence agencies might have been drugging him against his knowledge, which by the way is exactly what they did with Philip Kerr. In this case, Philip Kerr versus Attorney General and Philip Kerr versus MI5, same like debate in different court cases. And there he's got proof because his girlfriend at the time, who they, you know, forced into drugging Philip Kerr, confessed to him, and I think she submitted a statement to the court. So we have proof that intelligence agencies do drug people against their knowledge and certainly against their will. So that might have happened with John Nash. So keep that in mind. And I will stop this video here and answer the other comments in another video so that you can pick the comments that you're actually interested in. So bye for now.